Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Good evening. This is Sri here, and I do have a new guest, Joshua Keen. And Joshua, I'll say hello.
Hey, everyone.
All right. So, Joshua, we're here to talk about college football. We have the playoff, which is the 12-team playoff for the first time ever. Just like I'm so used to March Madness, I'm used to all the NFL playoffs. So, what I want to do is give you the floor. You're the first-time guest. I know you're a big Tennessee Vols fan, so I want to give you the floor and tell the viewers about your connection with Tennessee and how you became a fan, and then we can get into the college football playoff directly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Super excited for college football playoffs and all the championship games this upcoming weekend. As you just mentioned, I'm a huge Tennessee fan. Graduated in 2019, season ticket holder, so making my way to Knoxville. Live in Nashville now, but making my way to Knoxville pretty much every weekend during the fall. So it's been a great season. During my time at school, suffered through some pretty tough years where it didn't seem like we would be relevant anytime soon. Now we're back on the map, and looks like we're gonna have a matchup in Columbus with Ohio State. So couldn't be more excited, ready to get things rolling, and ready to kind of share some thoughts on the on the lay of the land. So yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, so Joshua, let's get into the playoff format itself. Right, this is the first time, so a lot of the viewers or a lot of the listeners would not really know much about the college football playoff. Usually, it was just the Final Four. First, it was just two teams that used to fight for the college football. First, there was no playoff. Then they had two. Then it went to four. Was last year eight, if I'm not mistaken, or is just
It was still four. Yeah,
it
it
was
was
still
still
four,
four.
right? Yeah,
Yep.
that's what I thought. Last year was four, and then they expanded to 12. That obviously opens a lot, and there is still some controversy about should we allow an 8-3 team. So that let's get to the next one, which is let's talk a little bit about you can talk a little bit of the format, and then we can talk about like a team like Alabama is potentially in. And we can talk about how a team that has lost multiple times is now in the playoff hunt, and then we can a little bit more go more about matchups because I know we have the huge SEC and Big Ten showdown this week with Georgia, Texas, and then Penn State and Oregon. So we can talk a little bit about that. And then right now, Tennessee is supposed to play Ohio State, which is coming off a huge loss against Michigan, which Ryan Day is 1-4. A lot of my Buckeye fans are not too happy about it, but we'll get to that later. But let's talk about the playoff format. What do you think? What do you think you like about it? What do you think you don't like about it? So go at it.
Yeah. So certainly no shortage of controversy in year one. Definitely think that the 12-team playoff is definitely more exciting, a lot more parity introduced in the sport, as we've seen in the past. You know, you've seen the Georgias, Ohio States, Alabamas kind of run the show for a while now, and it's really opens the door for teams like Tennessee, the Penn States that haven't been able to get over the hump. You know, they've it seems like they lose to Ohio State and Michigan every year, and now they're right in the driver's seat in the Big Ten championship this weekend. Certainly has its flaws. You know, there's some interesting paths that you could get to when it comes to the first two rounds at least. And first off, with the first round, for those who don't know, is the first time that there's going to be on-campus games for that first round. So the conference champions, or at least the top four conference champions, get a bye in that first round, and they'll end up playing the winner of those on campus games. And so, from my perspective as a college football fan, and you know, certainly love to actually like go to the games. I mean, one major flaw is I think that, I mean, even just from like an administration standpoint with these schools, like why would you not want to host a playoff game? I mean, you have Oregon that
Right.
went out and you know they won every game this year, and you know the state who they beat head to head gets to host a playoff game. And granted, there's no guarantees that they make it to the next round, and as a Tennessee fan, I certainly hope they don't. But you know, it almost seems like a disadvantage there. The other major underlying storyline with the 12-team playoff is the path that the 5 seed gets. And so, and this is not set in stone right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's starting to look like if Oregon does beat Penn State, we're going to have Penn State as a 5 seed still, maybe the possibility that Notre Dame jumps them. But either way, probably going to see Penn State as that 5 seed. They would then play Arizona State and Boise State to get to the semifinals. While Oregon, who, again, they have that first round bye, they have to play less games, shorter path to the playoffs, they would have to play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. So that one, granted, you have to win one game, you're in the semis. However, that one game that you're going to have to play is going to be significantly more difficult than that Boise State or Arizona State matchup. So just something to keep in mind is, I certainly wouldn't, I would think that the conference championship is certainly going to still have meaning. But I mean, if I'm Oregon, I mean, I'm not too upset if I let that game slip, because I mean, that's a much easier path than if you're Penn State and and you win that game, and then all of a sudden you got to play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee. One of those teams you already lost to this year in Ohio State. Tennessee, another team that's certainly not going to be an easy matchup.
Yeah, I think just looking at it right now, so the winner of so you got right now Oregon, Penn State, then you got SMU now playing. Who is SMU playing in the ACC? Clemson, right? Okay, Clemson, and then you got Georgia playing Texas, and then you got, is it UNLV playing?
Yeah, UNLV is playing Boise State. That's
Boise State, right? That's the mountain. Is it the mountain? No, that's the
Mountain
is it
West. Yeah, Mountain West
Mountain West.
champion.
Okay, that's
Yep.
the Mountain West. That's what I thought. So the way I look at it is that it's very interesting, right? I mean, when I try to compare this to college basketball, sometimes the number one seed has an easy path depending on the luck of the draw. But
Mm-hmm.
here it's slightly different. The playoff format is slightly different than college football, college basketball. And it's very interesting because everybody is going to be trying to see where they're going to be slotted. And like to your point, if Oregon loses to Penn State, it's not at the end of the world for them. So I think that makes for some interesting drama. I think, and I'll be watching that game for sure. It's an 8 o'clock Saturday night game, 8 p.m. Eastern for me. So I'm looking forward to that game. So let's get down to before we actually get into the matchup, before we get into them for SEC and the Big Ten, because those are the two big ones from a conference standpoint. I mean, SMU, obviously, I mean, they played well. Mustangs have done well. I mean, they finished 11-1. I mean, there's nothing wrong. They won 9 in a row, so nothing to be ashamed about. They actually, I think the new rankings came in. I think they're at number 8, right behind Tennessee, right? So the question I wanted to get your attention to is like who you thought should have been in. I mean, right now, when you look the way it stands, Alabama is in with like 3 losses. And there are 3 losses, all their 3 losses came in away games, I think.
Yep.
So was there, I mean, do you think why they are in this one? Of course, they have that big, big name, Alabama, even though Nick Saban is not coaching there.
Yep.
But your thoughts on who should have been in and who should have been out?
Yeah, so that Miami loss this week certainly opened the door for Bama, and not to say that they're 100% in. I mean, I think there's a possibility that the committee may end up, if let's say Clemson beats SMU, and then SMU still, if they stayed ahead of Bama, that would end up knocking them out. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting choice, and I think that the latest ranking kind of reflects that the committee is basically saying that Bama is the best 3-loss team in addition to Miami. So when you're looking at that group, you're really talking about South Carolina, Ole Miss. I know a lot of South Carolina fans are very upset about the way their season turned out. Um, and then for Miami, I mean, I think they definitely crawled to the finish line, so I wouldn't be too beat up about that one. But as far as Ole Miss goes, and I think that's the fan base that probably has the biggest argument and gripe with Bama being placed above them. Just kind of going through like their schedule. I know like a lot of the formula for how they do these rankings is really kind of driven by who has the best win, top 25 wins,
Mm-hmm.
like the quality of their losses, strength of schedule. And when we look at Ole Miss and Bama, they have a lot of common opponents. They didn't play head to head, but
Mm-hmm.
when you look at those common opponents, you had you have Ole Miss playing against Oklahoma earlier in the year, won that game. Bama lost that game. You have LSU. I think that's probably the best case for Alabama making it is that.
That was a big win for them on the road, winning like what almost like 29 points, like 42-13 or something like that. And there was also Alabama did win against. Well, they lost. Well, they lost. I think they won. No, they beat Georgia, right?
Yeah.
I think that was a big win for them. I think the biggest loss for them was Vanderbilt. I
Yeah.
think that I don't know how they lost. I mean,
Yeah, it's certainly one of the biggest head scratchers, and as long as I can remember watching college football. I mean, that one came out of nowhere,
and then the
especially.
South Carolina game was also a close one. They won
Mhm.
by 2 points at the end, right? 27-25. So that was a close game. And I mean, this is not the typical Bama you're used to seeing, right? They didn't have. I mean, they had some big wins, but again, Ole Miss actually beat Georgia too. In fact, they actually beat Georgia by like more than 15 points. So
Yeah.
when I look at it again, that was a common opponent that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, when you're watching the flow of that game, I mean, with Georgia, because I mean, I think that's also a huge point. You know, when you're talking about the strongest win that each team had, you're looking at Georgia, and I mean, Ole
Hmm.
Miss beat the brakes off of them. I mean, they
Right.
handily won, and both games were at home for Ole Miss and Bama, respectfully. And with that Bama game, I mean, Jalen Milroe looked like the best player on the planet for that first half, and then the wheels fell off, and they had a miracle play with Ryan Williams that I'm sure everyone's seen over and over again with that spin move on the sideline. But yeah, I mean, they barely pulled that one out. Certainly an impressive win, but I mean that seems to be carrying a lot of weight. And I also just to this point, I mean, I think my bias is probably showing a little bit with the Tennessee Bama rivalry through this conversation. But one additional point that I wanted to kind of make here is just going back 2 weeks ago, and I don't know if anyone was you know, really too beat up or paying attention about this. But when Alabama lost to Oklahoma 2 weeks ago,
Hmm.
and then Ole Miss lost to Florida, those are two drastically different losses, in my opinion. I mean, Florida has really had a strong second half with Lagway coming into the scene, and then Billy Napier probably saving his job. Well, Oklahoma has really crawled to the finish line, has had an anemic offense really all year. And going into that week, you saw Bama ranked one spot ahead of Ole Miss. And then all of a sudden, those two games happen where and both those games are on the road. Ole Miss loses to Florida. I believe it was a one possession game. Bama was never really in that game, can never really get anything going against Oklahoma. And the committee treated those losses pretty much the exact same from a quality of loss perspective. I mean,
Right.
they kept Bama ahead of them, and at that point, the decision was already made. Like, Bama has a better resume than Ole Miss. Needle didn't move last week with both of their wins, and now you're in a situation where you're in today, where you're looking back on the season and you're saying, I mean, I think outside of that LSU game, I think all the boxes are checked for Ole Miss to really have a better overall resume to make the playoffs, and they just didn't. The committee just didn't, you know, answer you know, they didn't give them the results that they really wanted to see.
Well, I think the one thing I did just to tag along with that, right? I mean, when you look at the losses, the loss that Alabama had against Vanderbilt, that was a shocking loss. I mean, it was a 5 point loss. But the loss that Ole Miss had, I think one of the worst losses they had was against Kentucky.
Absolutely, yep.
And Kentucky, when you look at it, they were like 4-8, and Vanderbilt is 6-6. So there is some truth to that part of how it pushed probably Alabama over Ole Miss. And I think that's where it is. But again, the other controversy, which I think staying in the SEC, because I think let's stay with the SEC because Georgia Tech game last week was just phenomenal.
Yep.
And I know a lot of my I know one of my friends' daughter goes to Georgia Tech, and she was telling me she wasn't too happy at the way the game was stolen from Georgia Tech.
I share a similar sentiment, but yeah, actually, my sister's at Georgia now,
Okay.
and we during Thanksgiving, we were all together and we were able to watch that one. So yeah, certainly some interesting calls in that game, particularly the that pass interference call that
And
seemed
the Yep.
seemingly
Yeah, go
directly
ahead.
led to Georgia points that pushed that game into overtime. But yeah, I mean there was, I would say, two or three very impactful calls. I think I mean, the pass interference one I think is the most impactful one, just being that it was later in the game. But it just seemed like every bad break that Tech got there, it really led to Georgia points right after. So, really valiant effort by Georgia Tech. Certainly would have changed the landscape of the rest of the season. But, here we are 1 week later, and Georgia's still in the driver's seat, looking like they, especially if they play Indiana. I would think that Indiana's probably going to be pretty outmatched in that game. And then they also have the opportunity to beat Texas in this SEC championship as well. And they may just get a
That's
first
true.
round bye.
Yeah, when I look at the rankings right now, when I look at which team has got the momentum going, obviously Oregon has not lost a single game. Notre Dame has surprised me, winning 10 in a row, and although they don't belong, they're independent. Texas, I wasn't too impressed with their win last week against the Aggies. It was I thought they should have won it easily, but I think Tech A&M made a lot more mistakes in that game
Mm-hmm.
towards the end. But let's get down to what you want to talk about. Potential. Let's talk about the SEC championship and the Big Ten quickly, and then we can dive right into um, the playoff. Right now where we think is the playoff, and I know we're waiting for the final brackets to fall. I mean, a lot of things could change at the time, and then we should probably just hop on at the time and then do one more just to do the
Yeah.
picks, and
Yeah, I'd
then
love to.
as each week goes on, we can get into the final eight, final four, final eight, and then we can get to the championship game too. So let's get down to the Georgia Texas game, which is the first one, which I think it's a 4 o'clock game, the 4 o'clock Eastern game, and then the Penn State Oregon game. So, your thoughts on the first matchup?
Yeah, with Texas Georgia, certainly I think when you look at the SEC, I think this is probably the matchup that everyone wanted to see. I don't know about going into the year, but just seeing what happened with Bama as the season went on. Tennessee's offense has kind of sputtered throughout the year. Georgia and Texas, even though Georgia had that tough game last week, I think that these are probably the two best teams in the SEC. Texas has a chance for revenge. They, had a very crazy game earlier on in the year where they lost to Georgia at home. Had that interesting call that was overturned. I know it didn't make a difference in the game, but also spurred a lot of controversy there. But yeah, I mean, I think these are the two best teams. If I had to make a prediction, I think that Texas probably pulls this one out. I think that they're just playing better ball right now. They very much can play with Georgia. I know they didn't show up that one night, but top to bottom, I mean, I think Texas is a very complete team. Love Quinn Ewers and the way their offense has been working this year, and
And Manning, of course,
of
sometimes I
course,
think
yeah,
that touchdown was pretty good. That touchdown was excellent.
yeah,
The way he was able to get to the pylon.
yeah, definitely moves a little better than his uncles do. But yeah, no, that will be certainly an intriguing matchup. Yeah, I mean, if Arch somehow gets into the game, that will certainly be a fun moment to watch. But yeah, no, I mean, no, and with the SEC championship, I mean, those two teams, like I think they're obviously locked in to the playoffs now. I don't know if their path changes drastically in a sense that neither of them are going to get the 1 seed. They may just flip flop if Georgia beats Texas, but got to like both of their chances, even regardless of how this game turns out. I mean, I think it's an overall pretty even matchup. Like I said, I would think that Texas pulls this one out, but with Georgia, they end up playing Indiana like the rankings are currently saying they will. You'd be in for potentially, I think what I have is the third game in a year. At that point, best of three will certainly mean the most in the playoffs with a chance to go to the semis.
Yeah, I'm on the same view too. I mean, I saw Texas play. I wasn't impressed, but they definitely, I mean, they can raise their game at the right time, and I think they kind of muscle their way out with A&M. Georgia, I haven't been really impressed. Especially, my mind is very fresh from the Georgia Tech game,
Yeah.
so that's one of the reasons why I'm not a believer in Georgia. And they can they can change my opinion by coming up with a big win, but I'm going to go with Texas as well. And then in the other matchup between Penn State and Oregon, your quick thoughts on that
Yeah.
before we get to the
Yeah,
playoffs.
and one other point with Georgia, I will say, with the way that Kirby Smart coach teams have always seemed to operate. you have games like last year with Kentucky and Georgia. They play down the wire, and it doesn't seem to make a difference when the big game comes around. So I'm sure Kirby will have his team ready to play. But yeah, no, I definitely think that'll be a very interesting matchup. Now going over to the Penn State and Oregon game. Yeah, I mean, certainly another intriguing matchup. I don't think Penn State going into last week thought there was going to be any chance that they'd be playing in this game, with Ohio State being 20 plus point favorites to Michigan, and somehow not winning that game. But Penn State, I mean, it seems like for years, and this is so interesting in a sense that, like, with Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State's, like, even with Oregon's, like, they're used to playing in these conference championship games. I mean, they each have their conference titles. Oregon's obviously from Pac-12, and I'm sure it will mean a lot to win a Big Ten title in their first year after making that move. But I mean, for Penn State, I mean, they have all the reason in the world to want to pull this one out, and it's not against, like I said, one of their traditional teams that they haven't been able to get over the hump with Ohio State and Michigan. And so, I mean, they have plenty to play for. But as I said earlier, I mean, that 5 seed just really seems like a much cleaner path. And so, if I had to make a prediction, I mean, I definitely like Oregon in that game. Penn State has been playing in a handful of close games this year that they probably shouldn't have. I mean, even going back to that Bowling Green game earlier on in the year, they just haven't been able to put teams away. And I mean, with the way that Oregon's been able to score points this year, it may be hard for Penn State to keep up. But like I said, not the worst thing in the world if they drop that game. I know they want to win that title for sure, but there's more to play for now, and that also kind of begs a better question too of, like, you have teams that are not playing in the conference championship games. I mean, I'll use Tennessee as an example here. If they made the SEC title, they lose and end up with 3 losses. I mean, you're taking a team that would have been a lock to make the playoffs, and now they're on the bubble. And I mean, I know the committee has kind of said that they're not going to penalize teams. At least they're implying they're not going to penalize teams for playing in a game like that. But I'll believe it when I.
Right. I mean, I think to me in the matchup there, staying with the Oregon and Penn State, Oregon has had some very close wins against Ohio State. I actually watched that game, 32-31, very close game, but
Mm-hmm.
they were not very impressive with like some other games as well, right? I mean, they squeaked past some teams, not convincing. Like I think there was one game.
Yeah, Wisconsin game.
I think it was the Wisconsin. Yes, that's the game. I think yes, we were. I think I was actually watching. Wisconsin had every chance to win that game, and Oregon only scored 16 points in that game. I mean, they've played some big games. I definitely think I'm giving Oregon the nod over Penn State in that matchup. I think it looks like you're going with Oregon too, right?
Yeah, gotta think that Oregon pulls that
Okay.
one out. But yeah, if I had to make a guess.
Okay. All right. Now let's get down to the actual potential matchups in the playoffs right now. So you go first. So we already know who's getting the buys. I mean, at this point of time,
Yeah,
you think it's Oregon
yeah, and even
and Texas?
just go. Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, it's going to be Texas or Oregon in that 1 and 2 slot.
Yeah.
I don't see a scenario where the Big 12 or the ACC get 2 bids. I mean, even if Clemson beats SMU, I mean, I don't know if they're going to keep SMU in. So that'll be a good test to see how the committee handles conference
Hmm.
losers, and of course that would totally shake up the playoff, especially for Bama there. But yeah, no, I mean, I think for now, I feel pretty confident in saying that. I mean, you're either going to have Boise State or UNLV. But as far as like the Ohio State Tennessee game, the SEC loser versus Indiana, Notre Dame versus Bama, it's probably looking pretty locked in there.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. So right now, let's talk about your potential matchup. Your potential matchup now has Tennessee going all the way to the Buckeye Stadium at this point, right?
Yeah.
Is that potential matchup right now?
Yeah, it looks like Tennessee will be going to Columbus for that one. Yeah, certainly going into the ranking show yesterday. I mean, the AP poll and the coaches poll both seem to indicate that that Tennessee had the nod over Ohio State. Obviously, the committee didn't agree there, so I was definitely hoping to host a playoff game in
Mhm.
Neyland. That certainly would have been a biggest game that I would have been able to go to, but looks like we'll be watching from home on that one. I mean, from Ohio State receivers, I mean, if they could figure out a way to utilize them, I mean, they're going to be a hard group to stop. Definitely, as far as all of the potential teams that as a Tennessee fan we could have faced in the first round. Seems like that we got the got the toughest draw there. But I mean the opportunity to face a team like Ohio State that typically, you would expect to see like in the conference championship game and probably like a first round bye in most years, getting a chance to play them with seems like Ryan
Mhm.
Day's job probably on the line. It's gonna be a great game. I'm not gonna. I'll make a prediction there. I'm gonna say Tennessee's gonna win that game. Purely out of just personal bias there. If Ohio State scores, what was it, 10 points against
Mish-
Tennessee, like they did against Michigan, I think Tennessee wins that game all day. But I'd be very very surprised to see Ohio State's offense that flat coming out against Tennessee. But I mean Tennessee's defense has still been strong all year. Really carried them. I mean with the exception of the Georgia game, have really smothered teams this year with their front four. So, really excited to see what they do against a out of conference powerhouse like Ohio State. And one other note on that game, uh, with and then this is maybe a more of a inside Tennessee circles type of talking point here.
mhm.
But when it comes to Josh Heupel's offense, going back to when he first started, 2021, 2022, different quarterback with Hendon Hooker, but offense was explosive, very up tempo offense, incredible receivers, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, and it seems like the pace of their offense and tempo that they've been running at has really been slowed down significantly over the last 2 years. Part of that may just be the fact that SEC teams have figured it out. Maybe it's the rest of the country, but I think this will be a
Mhm.
really good test to where Ohio State coming from a league that really hasn't seen these up tempo offenses in the same way that Tennessee has liked to run in previous years. So interested to see how Ohio State reacts to that style of offense, and if it is successful like it was a year or two ago, or if it will be a game that's slowed down and like Tennessee has seen all year, a lot of low scoring games where they have to really lean on their defense.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that Ohio State coming off the loss, and I think it was a very poor loss that they had. They had many chances to close the game against Michigan, and Ryan Day's job right now. I mean, every Ohio State fan I've talked to is not too happy at the loss, and the 1-4 Ryan Day, especially against the Michigan team that was 5-6, and Ohio State had their path clearly set for them, and that loss definitely puts a little damper in them and going and playing like a Tennessee team which is a little more high flying. I think I like your chances, which means that the next round would be against Oregon. I mean, if again, that's what's going to happen. But
Yep,
let's quickly look at before we get to that. I think we see right now Penn State is playing, I believe it SMU, I think, and then the winner plays Boise State, right? Is
it would
that? Oh,
be
no, no,
it would
no.
be
The Penn State will play
Penn State and Arizona State.
Arizona. I think it's Arizona, right? Penn State plays Arizona State, and then the winner plays Boise, and then the other ones would be Georgia, Indiana, would play Texas, which is kind of interesting because Texas and Georgia just would be or just playing, and then the Mustangs will play the winner of Notre Dame and Alabama. And I feel let's start with that team game first, right? If it's Notre Dame, Alabama, the winner of that I think will beat the SMU Mustangs. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm just calling it, and then I still think Texas doesn't matter. It's Indiana, Georgia. I think I mean, you don't know, like you said, right? Kirby Smart teams always play well, so let's pretend that I may pick just Texas there, just because of their offense is much better than Georgia,
yeah, you
and
got to
then
think that that game. I mean, for first round for Indiana, that's a tough task to ask them to go to Austin or Athens to pull
Georgia,
that win off. I
yeah,
mean, that's going to be there's better athletes on that side of the field. That'll be a tough matchup regardless. So yeah, you got to think that you'll get that if that side of the bracket stays the same. Definitely got to think that Texas Georgia matchup for a third time this year would end up happening.
okay. That's good. And then what do you think right now? Let's come back to your thing, which is Tennessee, Ohio State. I know you picked Tennessee, and then they play Oregon. How do you fancy the chances? Well, it's still early because I think we don't have the official ones, but let's pretend that's the case.
Yeah.
How do you chance your luck against Oregon?
I might be pushing my luck with saying that we're going to beat Ohio State and Oregon. So for the sake of not coming off as too biased, I'll go ahead and say that Oregon moves on. But I really
Well,
really
you
hope
can
I'm
still
wrong.
pick Tennessee. You can still pick Tennessee because one of the beautiful things about playoffs is that it's the possibility of an upset, and it depends on what team shows up that day to play. I mean, think about how all the things like Ohio State loses to Oregon by one, but then Ohio State loses to Michigan at home.
Oh yeah.
All these things could change because it's not like the bowl game where you're one and done. This is more where it depends on that day. It depends on which offense or defense shows up, how the coaching makes a big difference. And then, even a team like Oregon, they get behind a touchdown or two, and then you don't know how they would react. Their entire schemes could get appended. So, again, I'm fine. If you want to pick Tennessee, that's fine. But I think I know you're going with Oregon, so don't feel bad about being a homer there. I think I'm biased when it comes to all my teams.
Well,
So
this is the problem is that after let's say Tennessee does beat Ohio State and Oregon, that side of the bracket with Penn State, Arizona State, and Boise State, I'm definitely picking Tennessee over them again. So if I pick
okay,
Tennessee here, they're going all the way to the championship. Another interesting thing, I'm going to tie this back to baseball actually too with their playoffs. Something that we saw, I believe it would have been 2 years ago now, with the first round buys from the wild card.
hmm
That might be a similar situation here where you have that extra week. And I know football is inherently going to be a bit different here, where there's the practices are still going to stay intense, and they're going to have a break regardless. But you're going to get a team that's coming off a big win, no matter what, for every one of these first round games, and you have a team that is already comfortable playing in that playoff style atmosphere. They're already pumped up and they're ready to go, and then the team that they're playing in the first round, they haven't played since the conference championship week. So, I mean, they may come out pretty flat, and I think that you're gonna see one of these teams and that they got a first round bye blindsided by a team that's ready to play and rolling from that previous week.
yeah, that's a fair point. So yeah, so so let's again pretend again, like I said, right? So Tennessee, if you want, go with the heart and go with your mind.
We'll go with the heart. We'll pick Tennessee over Oregon.
Okay, all right, that's good. Okay, and then on that side, I think it doesn't matter if it's a Boise State, Penn State, or Arizona
Yeah,
State. I think you're going to pick Tennessee. And then on the other side, I still feel that Texas is the best team in that bracket, on that side of the
I
bracket
agree.
at this current time. I mean, if they beat, say, Georgia, because Georgia is going to beat Indiana, and then Texas goes to the final, I think it's the Mustangs playing against Bama or Notre Dame. And Notre Dame could surprise me. I still think you know what? I'll actually pick Notre Dame against Bama because I think Bama is weak this time.
Yeah,
And Notre Dame, it could be a Notre Dame Texas matchup.
yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Notre Dame's definitely playing exceptionally well for how their season compared to how their season started. I mean, I think everyone in the country thought that after they lost to NIU, which has got to be the most puzzling loss. We talked about the Vandy and Alabama loss. I mean, the
hmm
NIU and Notre Dame loss is up there with one of the craziest that I've really ever seen, especially considering looking back on it how strong Notre Dame finished. But yeah, I mean that Notre Dame Bama game is feels like a toss up. I mean, there's certainly with Bama. I mean, they have the athletes to get it done. They're not playing great right now, but I mean, Jalen Milroe can certainly catch lightning in a bottle. And I mean, and what I've seen with Milroe this year too is if you have a team that is not able to contain him from a running game standpoint,
hmm
I mean, they'll run all over you all game. And that's what happened with LSU, and it can get unraveled really quick. I do think that Notre Dame is pretty stout in the run game, so I think they do match up pretty well. I think that the lines would probably say that Notre Dame is probably going to be a slight favorite there. I would think, but could be wrong. But yeah, that'll be a close game to watch. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I think either one of those teams will end up beating SMU But yeah, for a prediction, I'll say that Bama ends up pulling that game out against Notre Dame and then also beats SMU.
Okay. All right. So I think the way I'm thinking about is like if you go Tennessee, I'll let you go Tennessee and I'll pick Oregon. And I think I'm going to pick the Oregon Texas matchup in the final. That's what I would think. And then again, this is all early. Saturdays when we get all the matchups, and then Saturday we'll see these two games, and then um, I think Saturday is when the brackets are going to be released after the games.
It'll be Sunday at noon. So yeah,
Sunday at
the
noon,
day
right?
after.
Sunday at noon. Sunday at noon. Okay, Sunday at noon. Okay, and then yeah, and then we can think about like which the final matchups are, and then we can go from there. But yeah, so I think this was fun. This is my first college football thing that I did. I did the actual last year. I think final predictions. I think we did that the final four predictions with a friend of mine. But again, none of us had rooting interest. Meaning, none of our college teams were
That's
in the
probably
thing.
that's honestly the most enjoyable way to watch college football. You don't have nearly as much stress. But yeah, no, this is
Well, when it comes to basketball season, that's when I get a little more tense about like even a regular season like today was actually pretty interesting. So Josh, this is great, but I think more to come on this once the playoff seedings are revealed on Sunday, like you mentioned, and and I'm looking forward to. I know Tennessee doesn't have a game this week, so I think you're going to be watching. Obviously, you cannot watch Ohio State because they're out, but you'll still get to watch because you don't know how this things are going to be slotted after the
um,
thing. So you still want to pay close attention to all the games going on because you could draw any one of those winners somehow. I think. I
but
mean,
yeah,
you may not play. Yeah.
yeah,
So I think it may be very interesting to
yeah,
watch
definitely
that.
that
So
Big Ten championship game will have a huge impact on that second round game. Yeah, no, definitely get to sit back and watch the chaos and not have to stress about Tennessee blowing a game that they shouldn't. We'll be good, but yeah, no, outside of yeah, thanks for having me on again. But yeah, I mean outside of I know you're a big huge UConn fan. I'm sure you have some listeners that are also UConn basketball fans. How are we feeling about Dan Hurley now? I mean that obviously it was the Maui, right? Invitational.
yeah, I lost all three, but I think they bounced back. They beat Baylor today, but I've been a big fan of him. I think the one thing I did, I was telling some of my UConn fans, was that I think he just needs to show a little restraint because I think the players are still trying to gel. The good thing is that today we had the Texas kid, McNeely, actually, showed why he is like one of the stars. He's going to be a growing star. I think the offense will slowly start going through him. I think having the center from Michigan, Reed, I think he still needs to gel. So I think they're still early. The Big East is going to be a brutal battle. They're going to
Yeah.
have. So it's going to be a fun thing to see. I think if you ask me which is the best conference right now, I think it's SEC is the best conference in college basketball. I mean, not showing my bias as a Big East fan, but I think that's where I see it. I mean, last year maybe Big East was very good, but this year I definitely think SEC is loaded, and it'll be very interesting to see the battles between. I think I know Arkansas is. I know Calipari in Arkansas is not. I think a lot of people are not too happy about that. But how do you fancy your like? But let me finish your answering yours. Like I feel okay. I think Hurley will bounce back. I think he just needs to
Yeah.
show restraint. And especially what happened there in Maui was that some of the referees were not used to it and they were teeing him up left, right, and center. I mean, there were a couple of games that could have been easily won. And I think he cost them the game. I mean, but
Yeah, he's
I think today he was much better. He showed a lot of restraint, and I think let the players play. Very physical game today, and they came out victors, and it was very close until the end. But wanted to hear your thoughts on. I know we're talking football, but I think hear your thoughts on quickly on the Tennessee chances. I know you guys lost Dalton Connect to the Lakers, and then I know how do you feel about your chances this year in the basketball arena?
yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely feels like a similar Rick Barnes team in years past. Great defensive team, a lot of athleticism. Just got to get it done when March rolls around, and it's always a lot to ask for. I mean, we talk about even with football, if anything can happen. I mean, basketball to the max when it comes to the NCAA tournament. So yeah, I mean, definitely think there's a good amount of experience. This time, like you said, with UConn, I mean, there needs to be time to gel. And Hurley also, I mean, he strikes me as a coach that, and I think in years past with Koeman and just a pretty loaded roster that UConn has had. They almost felt like they were kind of cruising, like they were the favorites going into both of those tournaments, I believe, in the last 2 years. And he just kind of feels like a coach where this may be his first big test with maybe he has some adversity throughout the year, but by the time March rolls around, I mean, you got to think that they'll be in a really good spot to make a run again. Yeah, no, Tennessee, I mean, like I said, similar structure with the way that our team's set up. Seems like we're off to a hot start. Won pretty handily yesterday against Syracuse, and by the time SEC play rolls around, we'll have plenty of great tests, strong conference. A lot of top 25 is loaded with the SEC teams. I mean, Calipari going to Arkansas is going to be an interesting dynamic, and then Kentucky looks pretty solid
Florida
so far.
surprised me actually. Florida actually has surprised me a lot because I think they're undefeated right now. And then I know Tennessee's 8-0, and then you do have Oklahoma this time too, right? I think Oklahoma, Missouri, and I think Texas. I mean, you have Kentucky, obviously Auburn. They are. I know facing Auburn last year for UConn was very challenging. That was probably one of the best games I think they had. I mean,
Yeah.
Dan Hurley admitted that was probably the toughest game that UConn had to play. I mean, not even the Purdue game. I think it was the Auburn game, which was more
Were they on the same? Were
tough
they
game.
on the same side of the bracket last year with Auburn? Because I remember Auburn got upset.
They did play in the Final Four, right? I think they did play in the Final Four, if I'm not mistaken.
Was that for? No, it was Auburn got. I think Auburn got upset last year. Once it was, it may have been
Oh no! Auburn got upset last year, right? Oh, yes, you're right. I think I'm mistaken. I think it was Alabama.
Alabama. Okay,
I'm
yeah,
mistaken.
yeah.
So I was talking about Alabama, and I just went to Auburn. Yes, you're right. It was Alabama, which was the Final Four, and then Auburn was they lost earlier.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yes,
because
you're
I
right.
mean Auburn was they were rolling into that tournament. I want to say they're on the same side of the bracket, but I remember with their loss, it completely opened up the path. Maybe it was for a team like UNC, but yeah, no,
Yeah, I meant Alabama. You're right. I stand corrected.
Alabama's got a good team again this year too. SEC is certainly loaded, and as conference play starts, I mean, shoot the playoffs with college football. I mean, they're gonna take us into pretty deep into basketball season. By the time I think most of the country will start paying attention to basketball, we'll almost be ready for March.
Yep, you're right. All right, so this is good. Mostly college football, but I think we'll be back and at another time to actually break down the final bracket, and then at the time we'll have a much better idea about who's going to, move on to the next round and going forward. So thanks again, Josh. This was fun. So what I'll do right now is that I'm going to stop the recording, and while you hang in, and good night,
All
everybody.
right. Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, good night.
Thank you for listening. Primo will be back soon.